You're listening to How to Drink Less, and I'm your host, Adriana Cloud. Whether your goal is to cut back, take a break, or say goodbye to alcohol for good, this podcast will help you stop drinking on autopilot, learn how to manage cravings, and feel fully in control around alcohol. It's easier than you think. Listen on to find out how. Hi, everyone. A few weeks ago, I had binge eating coach Amber Abilla as a guest on How to Drink Less, and we had a really great conversation about why you might find yourself eating more if you're trying not to drink, and the overlap between overeating and overdrinking, and lots of other interesting topics. If you haven't yet listened to that episode, make sure to check it out. It's episode 54. And Amber also invited me to be a guest on her podcast, which is called Become a Confident Eater. And we got to talk about why one drink turns into many, how alcohol affects hunger, and lots of other things. And that's the conversation that I want to share with you today. Thank you for listening. Enjoy.
If you are someone who has ever struggled with alcohol, over drinking, or just wanting to drink less, you're going to love today's guest, Adriana Cloud. Adriana is a sobriety coach and hypnotist, and she is also personally one of my good friends. We've known each other for many years, and so I'm so excited for you to hear her story today because food and alcohol have so much in common, and we just knew that we had to do this episode because how we approach it is the same too, especially when there's so many people out there who are just talking about just random tips or just willpowering it through. We are actually addressing the underlying root causes. So whether you're struggling with alcohol or not today, I still think all of these tips and hearing her story will be really relevant to you and help you break habits on a new level. So Adriana, how about you say hi and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, Amber. Thank you so much for having me here. I am thrilled to be having this conversation with you because, as you said, overdrinking and overeating often go hand in hand, and the same skills that help us to change one habit can help us to change another, and all of these things are so related. So I'm really glad that we get to talk about this. I'll say a little bit about my story. I used to call myself, or I would have described myself as a normal drinker when I was growing up. I started drinking as a teenager a little bit, drank more in college, and then started to drink more in my late 20s and 30s. I was married to someone who drank a lot, and so I just found myself drinking every day. And, I wasn't getting drunk every night, but it was certainly a very common experience to have a few drinks every night. And at some point, I realized that I really felt like I was depending on those drinks at the end of the night, that the thought of not having a couple of drinks at the end of the night felt really just uncomfortable to me. And I was aware for a while that I was drinking a bit much before I was ready to actually do something about it. And I always made excuses. Well, it's just busy at work right now, so I need the drinks to de-stress. Or, well, everyone else around me is drinking more, so surely it's not that big a deal. Or things like, well, I still haven't done anything stupid, or I haven't lost a job. Like, I'm still managing to do all of my work and pay my bills. And on the surface, I was holding it all together. But I was starting to notice that it really was affecting how I felt about myself. I was waking up feeling some level of hangover most mornings, even if I hadn't been going completely overboard the night before. And so at some point I decided, you know what, it's time to do something about this because I can see that it's a slippery slope. And if I just keep going the way I'm going, it's not going to end well. And so I started to try to cut back. And that's when things became really interesting. And I can say interesting right now in hindsight, but at the time it felt not interesting at all. It was just really challenging to try to cut back. And for a while, I had a lot of rules for myself. I would only drink Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday. I would only have 3 drinks and no more in a sitting. And it just was exhausting because I was just so focused on doing this complicated math in my head and negotiating with myself about when I could drink, how much I could drink. And it was just awful. But through doing all of that, I gradually started to recognize that all the things that I thought alcohol was doing for me actually were lies. And I could go out and have a good time with my friends, even without it. Maybe it was a little bit different than if I was drinking, but I would survive. So gradually, I got to a point where I could take it or leave it. And then I thought, well, if I could leave it, why would I take it? If I could really have a good time without it, I was at that point starting to notice the benefits of going to bed without alcohol in my system and how it was just making me feel better and I had more energy and all of that. At some point, I decided I was done. And my life really changed dramatically when I decided that's it. I'm done. I'm not drinking anymore. And through that work that I did on myself, I found coaching at some point, and it really was a light bulb moment where I recognized that my beliefs about alcohol was what had kept me drinking for so long. Once I changed my beliefs about alcohol and what it was providing, it was then easier to not drink. Then I thought, well, other people need to know about this because we have this stigma around alcohol and how if you find yourself drinking more than you want to drink, it's a willpower issue and you're doing something wrong and it's morally wrong and all of that. So the work I do right now, I'm trying to destigmatize this idea of what it means to be drinking more than we want to and why we drink more than we want to, and to help people understand that it's really just a habit. It's a tenacious habit that we have built through repetition. And that's good news because if you have picked up a habit, you can learn how to break that habit and build healthier habits.
Yeah, and I know so many people are resonating with what you just said around your story and all of these insights. Something that always stands out to me first, like when I think around alcohol, is this kind of identity and lifestyle change that has to happen. And I'm curious how you navigated that, where I think what holds a lot of people back is this, it becomes so wrapped up in your weekend activities and the things that you do with your friends. You know, when you're changing your eating habits, you do have to change that a little bit, but I feel like it's even so much more with alcohol where, like, you know, when people work with me, they're still going out to eat with their friends. They might be making different decisions and doing things differently, but they can kind of still maintain their same life with that. But I find with alcohol, it seems to be there's like so much more resistance of, but me and my friends, we always go out every Friday and we get drinks, and what will happen with them? Or what if I'm missing out on all these memories that people have out at the club, you know, and I'm drinking when I'm dating, and like how, you know, so how did you navigate going through that big like lifestyle and really identity shift around it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And definitely when I was doing this work for myself, I had this fear of I'm just going to lose my social life. I will never have fun again. My friends will stop inviting me out. I'll just be missing out. My life will be boring. What will I do with myself? So I definitely had those fears. So I absolutely get it if this is something that people are thinking about right now, if they're thinking about their relationship with alcohol. But what I want to say is that you can still do most of the things that you used to do. And yes, it takes some adjustment. But what I realized from myself was that alcohol was helping me to tolerate experiences that actually were not very enjoyable. So in the past, when I was still a drinker, I would go out and spend hours and hours at the bar drinking with my friends. And we would have conversations about nothing. At some point, they devolve into just random stories and you're just sitting there and you're drinking, but you don't have anything more to say to each other. It's no longer really fun. And so what happened when I stopped drinking was that I would still go out, but I would stay out for only a couple of hours. We would have a nice conversation. And then at some point I'll be, you know what? I think I'm done. I think I'm ready to be back home now. So I became a lot more attuned to what I actually wanted to do and what felt like fun. Because if you need to be drinking in order to enjoy an activity, I would question whether that activity is really fun and if it's really something that you want to do. The other thing that comes up a lot, as you said, is this idea of connection with friends and having fun with friends. And we worry that, well, if I'm not drinking and everyone else is still drinking, how would that work out? And yes, there is a period of adjustment, and some people might have thoughts about you not joining in the pitcher of margaritas, for example. But if your connection is built only on alcohol, that's not true lasting friendship. So that's very surface level connection. Maybe it's okay if those kinds of relationships change a little bit, and if some people fall out of your life. If that's all you had in common, probably these are not people that are going to be in your life long term anyway. But with the people who really matter, the people that you would meet and have fun with even without drinking, those people, even if they do continue drinking while you cut back and stop or just drink less, those relationships remain. And you just figure out a different way to connect. And when you show up with a clear mind and your interactions are not filtered through alcohol, you actually end up developing deeper connections because it's a deeper intimacy when you can really be honest and say what you mean without needing to be buzzed first. enhanced. So yes, it takes a bit of practice if you're not used to doing that and if you're used to relying on alcohol to be the social lubricant. But ultimately, the activities that you really want to keep doing, the people that you want to continue spending time with, they are as enjoyable, if not more. I would argue more enjoyable when you're sober because you're fully present. And to your point about creating memories, well, let me tell you, there's so many times that I've been out with friends on a fun occasion, and then I wake up the next morning and I don't fully remember what happened. I have like a vague recollection of I must have had fun, but I don't remember specific moments. Versus if you're fully present with a clear mind, you actually notice more and you remember more of the conversation and the atmosphere and the food you had and the music that was playing. So actually the experience is enhanced if you're not filtering it through alcohol.
Yeah. I'll share a personal story around this too, where with the friend thing, I have a lot of college friends who are kind of like the drinking buddies, right? They're the ones that I'd party with, that I'd go out to all these concerts with. And when I reduced my drinking, I did feel like I started to lose touch with them. And I felt really sad for a while because they would always be hanging out together and then they'd go to their hungover brunches together and they'd make plans for the next night and the next weekend. And I started kind of getting left out of plans. But something that I've noticed through that experience is, you do feel some grief around that. No one wants to lose their friends, especially when they really like them, they care about them. But through that, as hard as it was, I had this empty space that I was then able to be forced to, in a way, go out and make new friends. And had I not been forced to make new friends, I would have not made these newer friends that I have now, which are these entrepreneur, business, spiritual, like really amazing girls that I met online. And I literally went out on in a Facebook group. It was like an entrepreneur Facebook group. And I was like, who wants to be my friend? Like, I'm not trying to network. I just want like new growth-oriented friends. And I made two of my best friends that way. So I find that, it's like we could say like, oh, we can still find ways to connect with those friends, but maybe you do end up in this middle ground where you like feel a little bit lost and alone, but use that as an opportunity to say like, what new friendships might I want in my life? Who do I want to connect with over? And what activities do I want to do with people? And so I found that that's like been really helpful for me to reflect back onto of like when I've lost friends, but then I've gained so much more because I had to make new friends.
Yes.
And then the other thing that I remember you putting on Instagram once that really helped me with like thoughts around drinking and dating is, I think it was around Halloween. You said, if you wouldn't go home with them sober, you shouldn't go home with them drunk.
Yes.
And
Good
I was
advice.
like, that's so true. It is good advice because I think a lot of times when people are dating too, or maybe even if they're just like in a long-term relationship, they get in these habits of drinking with their partner and they think it feels like connection. It feels fun. It feels sexy. But then it's like, you're right. You wake up the next morning. It's like, what did we talk about? What conversations did we have? And so now like my criteria for dating is, do I feel the need to drink around them? And if yes, then that's probably a sign that I don't really like them or I feel uncomfortable around them in some way. And I found that then on the other side, it's a really green flag when I'm like, I don't actually want to drink around this person because I love our conversation so much that I really want to be present with them. And I find I just can't be that way when I'm drinking. So I start to look for like the fact that I don't want to drink around them.
Yeah, that is such a great thing to notice because I last year re-entered the dating scene after taking a break for a while and being happily single for a few years. And it was a really interesting experience dating as a sober person and seeing, first of all, what people put on their profiles around that, which we could have a whole separate conversation on. But just the whole idea of why do we feel the need to drink around someone? What does that tell us? And like, I'm so happy that you realize that for yourself is that we only want to drink if there's some kind of discomfort. If we feel comfortable with ourselves, if you feel relaxed in your own skin, you feel confident, you feel good about who you are and how you're coming across. And if the other person is projecting good energy, then there is no need to drink. We only reach for the drink to alter something that feels a little bit off, or when we think we're enhancing a pleasant experience. But really, alcohol numbs pleasure. And so just even from that point of view, if you're trying to have a good time and to be present and to experience pleasure, doing that without drinking is going to give you more pleasure because otherwise you're numbing your perception and you're numbing your senses. So things that normally would feel feel pleasurable, if you're drinking for them, you actually experience less pleasure from that.
Yeah. So why do you think that some people end up going like overboard on alcohol and struggling with alcohol, and then some people just like seem to be able to just have a drink? And is it possible to get back to that point?
Such an interesting question. And there's so many factors at play here. Some of it goes back to childhood, and there are people who are more predisposed to develop certain relationships with substances. If you've had trauma in childhood, if there's been addiction in your family, there are studies that show that you are more predisposed to develop a problematic relationship with a substance later on. But there is no direct genetic link that says if this happened, then therefore you will become a person who drinks more than they want to. There is no such direct connection. They're just predispositions. So a lot of it does depend on what you learn about alcohol when you're growing up, what is modeled for you, what you see your family doing or your friends or just the community around you, and what these messages that we absorb about what is alcohol used for. And we see so much on TV and in books and in movies, if there's a celebration, alcohol should be there. We should have a bottle of bubbly. I always point this out to people on iPhones. If you type the word celebration, the emoji that pops up is the champagne flutes. So this is so conditioned in us to associate celebration with drinking, right? Or if you see someone after a breakup in a movie, they're chugging whiskey from the bottle. So we have these associations with what alcohol is used for and what alcohol does for us. Or, if you're on vacation, you of course should be having cocktails with umbrellas in them. Of course, that's what you're supposed to do if you're on a beach holiday. And so some people absorb these messages and it becomes really ingrained. If they are used to drinking in certain situations, that becomes a habit. And it also depends on what else is going on in your life. Because let's say for people who drink to relax, if you don't have other ways to relax and alcohol is your only coping mechanism, you're a lot more likely to continue going back to alcohol to try to relax because you think it's helping you to relax. It's not real relaxation for the nervous system. It's just sedating you. But if you don't have other ways to relax, you're going to continue going to the alcohol. And similarly, if you drink, let's say, because you have social anxiety and a couple of drinks help you to feel a little bit loose around people, they make it a little easier to talk. So if you don't have other ways to practice calming yourself down and to build a little bit of internal confidence that comes from you and doesn't rely on what's in your glass, it's going to be challenging. And of course, there's also the way that the brain interacts with alcohol just on a very biological level, the huge hit of dopamine that we get. And some people are more sensitive to dopamine, like people with ADHD. It's been documented that they have different responses to dopamine that maybe someone who doesn't have ADHD. So there's a lot of individual responses and just the biology of all of us that contributes to how we react to alcohol. But a lot of it is conditioning. And of course, because alcohol actually does alter the brain, it does change your decision-making abilities. It just makes it a little bit harder to make decisions for the long term. So when you've already had a couple of drinks, it becomes harder to remember, hey, maybe I want to actually be clear-headed tomorrow morning for my meeting. And for different people, where that threshold is beyond which they're no longer capable of making quote-unquote good decisions, that varies. I find that for me and for my clients, and what I hear a lot is that once you start drinking, once you've had one drink, a lot of people struggle to then stop. If you're used to finding that really pleasurable, then the brain is conditioned to keep wanting more. Of course, there are people who only have one drink, every couple of months they have a glass of wine when they go out and they're happy with that. But for the majority of people, there is that response of, oh, this felt really good. This was a huge hit of dopamine that I got, which the brain interprets as, oh, this felt so good. It must be important for survival. So let's keep getting more of it. And most people don't have the awareness to then practice talking themselves through, oh, I'm having the desire, or my brain tells me I should have more, but do I really want more? How do I know that I want more? So most people don't have that awareness to really sit with what's happening and to question, do I really want it? Or is it just the conditioned response for, oh, my glass is empty and I should be reaching for more, versus what does my body actually need in this moment? These are very different things.
Right. I think that's a good point of the ability to question your thoughts and, just some of the skills that we have as coaches now that everyday people people just don't really have can make it a lot more difficult to just stop. And I do think can be certain social situations that are harder. Like I know if it's for me, like I still drink. I drink a lot less than I used to. And I just think every year I get older, I just don't want to drink as much too. But it's always more around like it's easier for me to say no to drinking at a dinner because I'm not perceiving that that's a time I really need it versus like when everyone is out, like I'm at a party and everyone
Yeah.
else seems to be drinking. And so, maybe just the awareness around that too for people of like when it feels easier to have just one or situations where it feels harder or, but one thing I love about you though, you live such a full life. And I think maybe that's one of the misconceptions that people have is like, oh, like if I were to quit drinking, I'd just be like this boring old grandma who just sits at home and reads all day and does nothing. And like, I don't see that from you. Like I follow you on Instagram and I'm seeing just, you do all of these fun nights out and have these beautiful weekends. And I think that's something that you demonstrate really well. And maybe you can speak more about how your life has actually expanded more versus this idea that my life is like going to shrink and get worse and, just be kind of boring if I don't drink.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's true. My life is so much richer and I do so much more than when I was a drinker. Because when I was a drinker, I spent a lot of time in bars drinking, which I'm not going to argue. There were some fun moments there. I have some great memories of times with friends, connecting and laughing and sharing stories and all of that. But a lot of it was doing the same thing most nights of the week, just sitting in a bar versus now. And I do still go to bars sometimes and just order non-alcoholic drinks. But for one thing, I have a lot more energy because when I was a drinker, I would wake up just feeling tired and regretful and oftentimes ashamed of how much I had drunk. And just my body was tired. I just had no energy at all. So I didn't have the energy to go out and do things versus now I actually have energy. And I also have a lot more confidence. In the past, I felt like I had to drink to fit in. I just had low self-esteem and I was kind of shy maybe. And so that limited what I thought was available to me to go out and do versus now I'm a lot more likely to just go and try stuff. Like I signed up for a dance class a few months ago and I go to poetry readings and read at open mics. I go running, I go hiking and I go to concerts sober. And it's a really wonderful experience to be fully present. But I think this comes from just knowing myself better because I think that's the other thing that when we drink, or at least that was my experience, I didn't really know myself. I was so used to numbing emotions with alcohol that I didn't really fully have access to, well, what do I actually like versus what are some things that I do because there's alcohol which helps me to tolerate them. And when that was removed, then I really was forced to reckon with, do I like spending time going to the bar this many nights a week? Do I like spending this much time with this particular friend? Or do I maybe just want to see them every few weeks for a coffee? And that frees up so much time when you really get clear on what are activities I actually enjoy versus what are activities that I was just drinking to get through. And I was just kind of killing time through that. So I have more time and I have more energy. I have more confidence. I'm fully present to enjoy what's out there in the world. And I do want to model that. And I'm happy it comes through. But I want to model that you can have a wonderful, beautiful, rich, fun life without alcohol required.
It brings me back to that story I shared earlier about my friends where it's like you might be in this middle ground where maybe you stop the drinking at the bars and you feel like, I don't know what I want to do. And like you said, it's like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what my hobbies are. But you kind of have to be in that middle ground empty area where you like take out the old before you bring in the new of the new activities that you want to find and the diversity of things that you're going to discover over time are what's going to fill up your week in a different way now.
I do actually want to speak to that too, because I want to clarify that full sobriety is not required for this. You don't have to give up alcohol completely in order to change your relationship with it. But what I would invite people to question is, what are the moments where alcohol feels like it's necessary? And to look there and to really question, well, why is it necessary for me to drink to enjoy a dinner out? Or if everyone else around me is drinking, what do I feel like I'm missing out on if I don't join in? So to really start to question, what do I think is missing if I don't drink and why is it required? Because you don't have to remove it completely. But what I love to talk to my clients about is this distinction between I need it versus I want it. Because if it's just like, oh, I want it because the taste or because it's really special or I want to really be able to toast with everybody at this occasion, that's one thing. But if it feels like, oh, I need it or I won't be okay, I need it and or otherwise I would feel really weird, then that's a very different story. And that doesn't feel good. When we feel that we need something, that doesn't feel good versus making a really powerful choice that, oh, I want it and I'm going to do that. And I feel in control versus, oh, I must have it or I won't be okay.
So good. I absolutely love that question. Everyone should take some time and pause this episode and do some journaling on that, because I do think that is the key distinction there of where am I needing it versus wanting it. And I think that really is the key there to like moderation is in all these times I feel like I need it. It's like I have to keep drinking more to get through these things versus like sometimes, maybe we just want a glass of wine at dinner and it feels really good. And it's like a true want and a desire versus something that we feel like we can't live without.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yes. Do that. Everyone should do that.
How has alcohol impacted your eating habits and just your eating in general?
Such a great question. When I was still a drinker, I had more disordered eating for sure. I would sometimes drink instead of eating because I was always mindful of my weight and always trying to lose weight and always telling myself I'm overweight and I need to lose weight. And so I noticed that if I drank on an empty stomach, that would suppress hunger. But of course, the downside of that is you end up getting drunk quicker and maybe make stupid decisions after that. But I definitely used to sometimes drink in order to not eat or to delay eating. But then what would happen sometimes too is the opposite, where I would come home from the pub, had a few drinks and feeling buzzed, and then I would just have the munchies and I would go on this eating frenzy. And at that point, it's not real hunger because alcohol messes up with the hunger hormones. So what can happen is that your brain actually thinks that you're starving. At some point, it can kick up this starvation response where your brain is like, oh no, let's panic. I need to eat everything in sight because I'm starving, like the body is starving. When that's not actually what's physically happening. Even when I had had food earlier in the evening, sometimes I would come home and feel like completely starved and I would just keep eating until I couldn't eat anymore. But it was this really strange experience because nothing I ate was satisfying because I wasn't truly hungry. It was just the brain sending incorrect signals or interpreting the signals incorrectly because alcohol affects the hormones. So that's for sure something that I was experiencing a lot of. And the result of that was I was putting on weight, even though I was trying to lose weight, always trying to lose weight. But I was just eating at times when I wasn't hungry. And conversely, sometimes too, what would happen is I would think, oh, I need something. Oh, I must need a drink. Like, let me go get a drink versus actually listening to my body when maybe it was just trying to tell me I'm hungry and I need a nutritious snack rather than a glass of wine. But we get into this habit of when we have the signal of, oh, I need something, to go to alcohol because alcohol is like an easy shortcut for it changes how you feel really quickly. And so it becomes this shortcut for I'm going to now feel better when I have this drink versus really tuning in and checking to see, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? What do I really need? We don't pause to ask ourselves that. So I'm sure that I'm not alone in what I've just described as far as the relationship between drinking and eating. But tell me what else is coming up as I share those examples.
Definitely. I think I definitely relate to the late night munchies of like coming home after drinking and then overeating and binge eating. And for me too, especially when you are still actively struggling with food and binge eating, we're already trying so hard during the day to not binge. And so then when those inhibitions are lowered a bit, I mean, it's just like your brain's going to whatever's most automatic and habitual, and that's probably going to be binge eating. So it becomes very easy to binge then when you're drunk. And when people are trying to heal a relationship with food, I'm never going to tell anyone that like you're not allowed to drink, but I'm like, if you want to make your life a lot easier, like let's try to do your best to cut back on it because that will just make your life easier. I think it's like when we are doing it during the day, like when we're trying to stop binge eating during the day, it's like our practice time. And then doing something like going out, having some drinks, coming home and not binge eating, that's like game time. You need a lot of practice in order to get to that point. Otherwise, it's just, it's not going to go its best. I do typically recommend that if people are going out and drinking to make sure that they eat some food before.
Yes.
People are like, oh, but then the calories and well, I'm like, well, if you don't want to have so many calories, like maybe we shouldn't be drinking because those calories aren't really doing anything for us anyways. So yeah, just like good things to consider. I also used to have a lot of fear around the alcohol calories. And so I think that also is like, okay, well, eat less earlier in the day so that way I can drink more. But again, good reminder that alcohol doesn't really have any nutrition. I love that you said how it kind of puts our brain into the starvation mode. It thinks that we need even more food after that, even though we've technically already had calories. And so it really can throw a lot of that off, not to mention like its impact on our gut health and how that can impact everything with our hunger or fullness, weight gain. So, I mean, obviously, I don't think any of us need to hear that alcohol is not doing our body any favors, but I do think it's a good reminder that of just another reason of why maybe we want to cut back, why it would be good to quit or just drink less overall, and around the fear of alcohol calories. So I was going to mention, I remember going through binge eating recovery and hearing from people that like I shouldn't be scared of the alcohol calories because that's kind of like my eating disorder brain coming up, that I should just, calories are not good, they're not bad, that's okay to have a drink. And I kind of disagree with that. I think the demonization of alcohol calories is kind of helpful in a way because it is a toxin to our body. And I sometimes find that the food freedom people go like way far to the other side. And I don't think we need to like be beating ourselves up super guilty about it because we have a drink, depending on what it is, 100, 200, 300 calories. Sure, fine. That's like having a dessert. Maybe it is something we want to do every now and again. We can trust that our body will figure it out and it will handle it. But I don't think there's anything wrong with, noticing that maybe that anxiety there around how many calories are in drinking and using that to maybe evaluate, is this actually something I want to do? Like, is this really where I want to be spending my calories? Or would I much rather have like a delicious steak with yummy vegetables and a beautiful grilled potato from that fancy restaurant that I'd spend just as much money at, but like actually enjoy it and leave super satisfied and feeling amazing in my body?
Yes. I think that's really the point that I would make too. It's not about, go, these calories are bad and these calories are good. It's more about just having the information, just knowing how many calories are in a glass of wine, because I think most people don't recognize, like they don't realize what actually they are consuming when they drink a glass of wine or a cocktail or what have you. So just to know what it is, and then you get to decide. Now that you have the information, you get to choose. Do you want to have these calories in the form of a glass of wine, or do you want to have these calories as a potato or something else? It's just about making an intentional choice rather than, because here again, marketing plays a big role. And we don't think about the nutritious value of drinks as much as we do about food. And again, to reinforce that alcohol has no nutritious value, it doesn't actually give you anything beneficial. And on the contrary, it can affect how your body absorbs other nutrients. It definitely slows down metabolism and things like that. So there are other effects besides just the what are commonly called the empty calories of alcohol, because again, they deliver no other nutrition to you. It's just calories, and it's mostly sugar that your body ends up trying to absorb and process. So yeah, it's not about demonizing, but I think it's just about making an intentional choice.
Yeah. So I want to hear if you have any other last minute thoughts or things you want to leave the listeners with. One thing I just made a note of that I wanted to reinforce that you said earlier that I really loved was that food tastes better when we're not drinking. I think a lot of people have this misconception too. It's like the experience of food goes together with the glass of wine or the chips with the margarita. But I would 100% agree with you that when we aren't drinking, we can actually taste the food and actually remember that experience. And it does make it so much better. So I love that you said that. And I wanted to like call that out as a big takeaway for people too.
Yes, absolutely, because alcohol numbs the palate and numbs the other senses too, including the sense of smell, which is so important when we're eating something. So for sure, I would recommend that people try this for themselves and just notice how differently you experience food if you're not consuming alcohol with it. But a couple of other things I do want to say is that you mentioned the social aspect of drinking and how that can be a factor when people are considering cutting back. And what I would invite people to think about is how much of that is just a ritual. Because we tend to think, oh, it's the alcohol. But time and again, what I found with my clients is that when they really pause to think about it, it's the ritual. So for example, if you're used to having a drink with your partner after dinner, it's not so much what's in your glass. It's that moment of, okay, we get to sit down now and talk to each other and have this shared moment of talking about our days or what have you. So it doesn't actually matter what's in the glass. You can have the same ritual of connection with a cup of tea or a mocktail or something else. So just to notice how much of your desire for alcohol is just the desire for what the alcohol represents. And sometimes it's that connection. Sometimes it's permission to stop working. For a lot of people, it's that. It's like, oh, I'm done with the workday. Now I get to pour a glass of wine because now that's my signal that I can now relax and I get to have me time. But if you recognize that that's what's happening, you recognize that it's not about the alcohol, it's about the ritual. So again, looking to see, is there something else that I could do that could be be the signal to my brain that, okay, now it's time for me. I'm done with the workday. Instead of pouring a glass of wine, what else could you do that would feel like self-care and like a little treat? So that's what I invite people to think about. And then when you notice the thought like, oh, I need a drink, what I tell my clients is always assume that's a lie, because alcohol is not a need. We don't biologically need alcohol to survive. So think about when your brain tells you that, just assume it's a lie and then go questioning, what do I really need in this moment? Do I need a glass of water? Do I need to go and punch a pillow because I'm angry? Do I need to call a friend and cry? Do I need to go snuggle my pet? Do I need to move my body? So assume it's something else that you need, not alcohol, and then see if you can solve for that. That's my advice.
Those are so good. I love all of those takeaways. And I feel like people can rewind that section right there and apply all of that to food and think about like the rituals they have around food, the things they might need instead, how they can like still keep those rituals without having to feel bad. You know, maybe you have a dessert ritual every night and maybe you're trying to cut back on sugar. It's like, well, maybe you have a tea ritual then. And so you can still get that time without having the negative effects that you don't want. So I loved all of what you just shared. So tell people how they can find you if they want to know more about how to work with you or get in touch with you and be in your world.
Yes. So I guess maybe the best place to start is just my website. It's adrianacloud.com. And there you can find links to my podcast. I have a podcast called How to Drink Less, where I share tips every week for people who are trying to cut back. And you can find out more about where I am on social media and ways to work with me. So that is the best place to start.
Thank you so much. I think everyone needs to go check out her stuff. I'm such a fan of you because I think, the work you're doing is so important and we have so much in common in what we teach. So, if you're struggling with alcohol, that will help you with your relationship with food and vice versa. So go check her out for sure and make sure you get all of her resources. Go check out her podcast. It really is amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Adriana.
Thank you for having me. If you're looking for practical advice for how to say no to alcohol and say yes to yourself, you will want to get on my email list. Sign up to receive my free guide with 7 steps to kickstart your sobriety. The link is in the show notes, so go and grab it now, and I'll see you soon in your inbox.